This is basic 101 of any business. Know your numbers, like know your margins. And so they're missing a massive opportunity. So you either keep up with it or see you later.
Exactly.
Give you 5 years. But that wasn't $10,000 worth of sales. It was probably more like $15,000 worth of sales and $5,000 worth of fees.
Yeah.
So they would have said to me, oh yeah, you're paying VAT on $10,000 worth of sales. Basically, our software does 95% of the work for them.
On today's episode of the Future Tax podcast, the guy who makes e-commerce accountant not a pain in the ass, Peter Moran, co-founder and CTO of Link My Books. And let me just knock it right out of the gate because viewers do want to know why you look so handsome.
I look so handsome because I live in Australia, I've got a tan, and I hate it when people... Oh, should we turn the Alexa off?
It should do the trick. So yeah, as you said, we are here in Australia. Company was founded in the UK.
Yep.
And we got to meet here in person to have this conversation, which is awesome.
Yep.
So we get to what Link My Books does. The best way to get into it is basically by you telling the story. How did you come up with the idea for Link My Books? What was the problem you initially tried to solve?
Okay, so my business partner and I, Dan Little, used to be quite big sellers on Amazon. And at that time, this is pre-Brexit, one of the biggest issues that you had was around sort of pan-EU and VAT. And so there was very limited solutions kind of out there. Now, Dan and I came from very different backgrounds. Like I'm a software engineer and Dan has been doing all sorts of other things. And when we kind of got together, originally we were actually competitors. And so when he was telling me how he was doing it, it was all about Excel and very difficult, complicated ways. And I was like, well, I've solved this. And he's like, well, how did you solve it? And I'm like, well, I built a bit of software that allowed me to categorize where my sales went to, and therefore I knew what the tax jurisdiction was. And he was like, can I use it? And I said, no, because I built it just for my kind of business. So that was kind of where the initial idea came from. And eventually Dan sold his business and I sold my Amazon business. And Dan sort of said to me, he said, Pete, what about let's do this for other sellers? And initially I was quite reluctant because, I just sold a business and had been quite stressful at the time. But eventually kind of I agreed that, this is something that we should kind of try for the UK market because there were plenty of sellers that we knew exactly the problem because we were facing it. And then, we started building it, or I started building it, and Dan came up. He's got whilst he's not an accountant, he's one of these anally retentive men around tax, a little bit less than me. I'm a little bit maybe slightly sloppy, but he could come up with the exact rules that we kind of needed. And so we built a sort of beta version. And the funny thing was, as soon as we hit our beta version, we had customers almost straight away. It was incredible. We never expected it. That we knew that people had that problem, but not quite as many as we'd seen straight away.
So what's the problem? Put in a sentence specifically. What was the problem, or is the problem?
Well, there's two problems really. One is basically bookkeeping for e-commerce is a pain in the ass. Right, you have to account for every sale, every fee, every bit of spend that's kind of come on a seller's account. It needs to be articulated in your accounting software totally accurately, and that in itself, is on its own is very difficult. But the second bit, which is more complicated, is working out where tax jurisdictions are, right? So in the UK, let's say pre-Brexit, because it was a slightly more complicated world, there was lots of rules around where, if you made a sale to Germany, right, it doesn't necessarily mean it was taxed in Germany, but if you had stock in Germany, it would be taxed in Germany. And so pan-EU sellers, which were sellers that literally shipped across Europe, we would usually have a business entity in each of the country, or at least a tax entity in each of that country, a VAT entity, and you would need to account for it in the right way in your books. Now, not to be clear, we didn't deal with the specific tax side, but we needed to make sure that our UK tax side correctly accounted for that, and then say the other parts of it were not accounted in your UK sales, and then you would use another third party like Taxamake or someone like that would account for it. So that was in the kind of like pre-Brexit world. Post-Brexit, in some respects, has got simpler in the fact that you haven't got all of these kind of like pan-EU regulations in the same way. So what as a UK seller in particular, the important thing would be to say, well, where is the sale shipped to? So if I'm selling to the UK, then, and this is kind of simplified, this is not the totally accurate rules, but simplification is that if I'm selling to the UK and I'm shipping to the UK, it's a UK VATable product. But if I'm shipping outside of the UK, right, it's a non-VATable product. And so you need to account for all of those in your accounting software like correctly so that it's got the right VAT rate. Now, on top of that, just to make things even more exciting, then you have things like in the UK that you've got like different tax rates for different products. So let's say you're selling baby goods, right? That's going to be reduced rated, which means like a 5%. And so you need to, again, break these tax codes down into a much smaller amount. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, so you built the software to do all that, because there's basically for every piece you sell, and you sell hopefully thousands and thousands of products each and every month, week, whatever. So not using a software like yours, how does the daily life of an e-commerce seller looks like if he has to do that? Like, how does he actually do it?
Well,
is it even possible to do
the
it?
truth is it's not possible. And what we've seen is so many sellers make ridiculous mistakes.
Yeah.
So one of the classic ones, let's say Amazon, it's an easy one, is that they would present a summary view of all of your sales, all of your fees, blah, 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 blah. They would take that and then they would basically create a journal or an invoice in their accounting software, and then they would try and get that to line up. But that's totally inaccurate, because as I said, you've missed sales that are different VAT rates, you've missed sales that have shipped into different countries. On top of that, fees can come out with different tax rates. So some fees are going to be reverse charged. So if you take Amazon, for instance, some of their fees are going to be what's called reverse charge, where effectively the entity may be in Luxembourg, which is quite classic for Amazon. But let's say their the advertising fees are actually billed from a UK entity. So there'll be like a 20% VAT, whilst the actual fulfillment fees will be reverse charged. So if you've taken that summary view and then you've just put it inside your accounting software, you either overpaid or underpaid the VAT. And to make it worse, right, the UK government, at least, they making tax digital, they actually need these summaries to be done. You need to have a view which is effectively daily. So you need to have a day's worth of sales. So you totally miscalculated it. So some sellers try and do more complicated things with spreadsheets, but 99.9% of the time it's wrong.
I was just pointing out that basically you're lost if you try it on your own, even with the most advanced spreadsheet, because of all the implications, intricacies, and things basically you don't know, and you just do it anyway, somehow mix it, match it together. But what do you think? Is it, I mean, it's the seller, but then usually those companies do have accountants as well. So I'm imagining not also the seller will make some mistakes along the way. What about the accountants? What's your experience?
Okay, I've got personal experience and business experience on that. Firstly, accountants often totally get it wrong. Right, I'll give you a really simple example that kind of happened to me with an accountant.
Yeah, when you had your Amazon FBA business.
When I had my Amazon FBA business, and that was the way that they talked about accounting. We got paid, let's say, $10,000 into my bank account, right? That they would say, oh, let's allocate that $10,000 to sales, right? But that wasn't $10,000 worth of sales. It was probably more like $15,000 worth of sales and $5,000 worth of fees. So they would have said to me, oh yeah, you're paying VAT on $10,000 worth of sales. Well, no, I should be paying VAT on $15,000 worth of sales. Now, technically as a director of the business, even though I'm like, oh, this is great, my accountant's dealing with it, they've got it wrong, right? So from an accountant's perspective, they often do not understand the rules, and they won't, because it's kind of complicated. Like, they just don't have the experience. And for what I've seen is, and also visiting lots of exhibitions, accountants shy away from e-commerce because of the complexities of it. Now, in my view, this is kind of the worst thing that they should be doing, because yes, it's complicated if you're trying to do it all yourself, but if you've got the right software to help you do it, it's actually probably the easiest type of client that you can possibly have.
Also, I've found that some accountants take e-commerce clients on because some of them can't say no, and the other ones don't know what they don't know. So basically, they onboard these clients, and then the madness starts. Some of them are overwhelmed, or some of them just make it, as you mentioned, that's just 10K sales, whatever.
Yeah.
So basically, they roll on. The errors keep piling up.
100%.
And we'll see how and where it goes. To be honest, that's of course another conversation. But at the end of the day, your solution was built out of the problem you faced for yourself, and then, hence, Link My Books. You created a solution that takes from different platforms. What are there? Amazon, Etsy, TikTok, Shopify, what
eBay,
else? Okay. WooCommerce,
Walmart.
So basically the big ones.
Yep.
And you make sure that all the data, fees, and everything that basically flies around in the orbit of one's e-commerce is linked properly to the accounting system.
Correct.
So just to make sure you're not an accounting solution per se, but you basically prepare the data for the accounting to be done, or is it like
we're more a bookkeeping service. I think that's the easier way of explaining it. Like a lot of accountants use us because, as I said, the manual existence is almost impossible. But like a lot of clients, because of software like Xero and QuickBooks, they don't really need an accountant unless for peace of mind, because as long as they know what they're doing, you can actually do most things on its own.
Continue.
Huh?
Just to make it a little less
quieter. So I forgot what was the question around.
That you're not so much in accounting, like you're a pre-accounting service.
Yeah, so we're a pre-accounting service. So we work with the accounting software we use are Xero and kind of QuickBooks. They're the sort of biggest two in like the UK, Australia, and US, who are our main markets. But yes, we push the data into that accounting software.
So prerequisites to use you, or to make use you for better sake, is UK-based business?
No, not just UK. Like we steer away from EU because of like as I'm sure you know, like every EU country is totally fragmented. Is that they've got their own rules, they've got their own accounting software. Like whilst the UK is our home market and probably the one that we are, the most dominant and have the most understanding, like Australia, another big market, the US, another. We have a lot of clients in the US, but we don't try to make that our main market because in some respects the taxes are more complicated and less complicated because of state taxes versus federal and stuff like that. We do a bit with Canada as well, but again, complexities around Canada. But as a main markets, UK, US, and Australia.
And then, of course, on the other side, Xero and QuickBooks as the actual accounting system that the business is using.
That's right.
So from your perspective, and you kind of answered it a little bit, that the special situation in the European Union, it's maybe gonna be more easier in the future. We don't know. There's gonna the e-invoices gonna come. We'll see. But mainly, you work at the intersection of data in, data out, and you prepare it in the best possible way, considering all the information. You mentioned, how many clients do you have? Like, how many users does?
1,000.
1,000 now. And so you also recently got acquired by Visma, 2025. That was a big step. Like from this new perspective now, what do you see? What has changed for Linkbooks also in your capabilities of what you're able to do now?
It's an interesting question. I think we have got a little bit the best of both worlds with Visma. Is as a relatively small company, we can kind of move fast and adapt. But we've also got the backing of a big company which also knows this space. And so, where things, for example, like when legislation or whatever changes, is that we don't have to keep an eye on all of the legislation, because Visma will be telling us that these are the new rules, or the things that we've kind of got to be put into it. They obviously make us a better company across, every other area, whether or not, I say, legislation or contracts with other businesses. We can get better rates. Security, we've become even better. We were good before. And so they mandated a whole load of best practices, which, because they've got such a unique brand of companies, that have just made us a better company, and being able to understand how to serve our customers even better, because we can get the experience from other similar companies in other countries and say, this is what's worked for us, and this is, what hasn't worked, and we can learn. And there's certainly been a big push inside Visma with AI across, all area of the business, which is super kind of helpful.
From your perspective, and now looking more at the e-commerce seller side, and then we move on to the accountant side, what do you expect to be the trends, or what do you see in terms of shifting trends, possibilities, or the future of e-commerce in general?
I think it's going to be an interesting journey, because I've already seen in my experience in e-commerce how much it's shifted. Sort of, if you go back, maybe 15 years, it was a relatively few players in town, and they were kind of quite big brand names. And then when Amazon FBA, which is fulfilled by Amazon, allowed much smaller businesses like mine to kind of be able to sell at great scale, what that introduced was a whole load of clever entrepreneurs launching their own products, really innovating with products. And that was originally started in the US, but then came to, sort of Europe ever so slightly later. And so what you would then find was a lot of people like me and my business partner, from relatively small bases, building quite big businesses, because we had the power of scale with Amazon. Now, originally, it was like the US and the Europeans that dominated, and the Chinese sellers were not quite as prevalent, because they didn't have the skills, the marketing skills, the photo skills. So you started to see a shift probably about, maybe 8 years ago, where there was a lot more Chinese sellers that started to kind of come in and compete with the established US sellers. And then you had the aggregators, right? So again, when I sold my business to Thras, who was an aggregator, what they wanted to come in, they saw all of this fragmented, individual sellers like us that were, doing quite big numbers. And they were like, well, let's take all of these sellers and roll them into one, bigger business. So they went on a bit of a spending spree about 8 years ago, and that, you sort of saw a lot of the smaller sellers kind of getting rolled into slightly bigger companies. So now where you're left with is the aggregators are still around, but they're not quite as dominant as they once were. They realized it didn't quite work. The secret sauce that these unique sellers had allowed us to scale and move incredibly fast. But when you kind of roll that in, you lose that entrepreneurial spirit, it started to slow them down. But they are still there. You've got the established brands that maybe had started in the sort of the Wild West or the Amazon FBA days, that have now really kind of sort of scaled up to be really decent sized businesses. And then you've got a lot of Chinese sellers that have kind of come in and taken over the markets which were there for the seller, which were there for the private label sellers. So where we're going to go, I don't know. I'm still seeing there's still there's not as many people starting, right? I think the barrier to entry is a lot higher than it used to be, 10 years ago, for the average Joe just to come in and start selling on Amazon and make a ton of money. So I think it's going to be more a matter of like the people that are maybe small now, they've learned their skill. Yeah. So where we're going to go is, I think that what we're seeing is like you either start selling and then you fall off, right? And we see a lot of this with like smaller businesses. Like the biggest churn that we have in our business is basically people stopping selling. So they've gone in, they've tried it. Maybe they were selling on eBay, maybe a bit of Amazon. They couldn't get the scale to kind of work. But the ones that get through that point, right, and you learn that the skill of this, then often they can skyrocket. And on top of that, I think that the new platforms are changing everything. So, for example, TikTok Shop. Though, you know, we were the first to actually onboard TikTok Shop as an e-commerce channel, and we weren't sure. Like, you know, I'm maybe too old for sort of TikTok and buying products from TikTok, but it is huge, like unbelievably huge. And so the new generation are going on TikTok, and if it's relevant to them, so there's a client that we've got, I won't mention the name, but they sell makeup products, and they are doing massive numbers, right? And it's like, you know, makeup videos, and they're selling massively on TikTok Shop, and so that's where I'm seeing the big shift is that, as opposed to I want to purchase, I don't know, a phone charger, and I go to Amazon, I want a phone charger, I've got a problem, I want to solve it. There's people that are looking at TikToks, and then they're basically selling a product that's going to make your life better, with not, as say the example with makeup, and they're like, oh yeah, I want to be able to do the better makeup, and so they then purchase this
directly.
Yeah, and I think that you're also going to find that Temu, whilst historically has been known as cheap Chinese goods, is evolving into a sort of more mature marketplace where more sellers are going to be actually putting themselves on board. So I would not be surprised in the next year or two that those two marketplaces are going to start, maybe not dominating, but they're certainly going to be giving Amazon a run for its money.
Interesting. So yeah, definitely changing a lot. And I'm also, but that's kind of a story for a whole another topic, like the impact AI will have on the entire e-commerce industry, right? Because before that, you had some sort of production costs, depending how professional you would want to portray your goods. But now that's pretty much done, or is getting done more and more by AI videos, or even AI avatars that basically just run the entire shop. So that's gonna change as well. And Chinese basically is putting much more pressure on towards the rest of the market. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And even like from what you've seen, and I'm not sure if you do that kind of work as well with Link My Books, but you got 6,000 clients. So basically there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information, and you see the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. If you can point out something, what would you say are the traits of very well running e-commerce businesses, and what are some traits of the ones that give you a churn rate?
Well, I think that, as I said, churn rate is an interesting one, because I think that I think you have to learn a lot very quickly when you're selling online.
Yeah.
And it's whether or not you can kind of push through and learn all of the lessons that you kind of got, you know, like cash flows, the obvious one. You know, you've got to buy stock, you've got to sell the stock, you've got to make sure that you've got that money in before you need to buy the other stock. So the people that don't learn those lessons go out of business very quickly. It's also differentiating like products. So, you know, I can't just go and sell a mobile phone case. Right? There's a gazillion sellers that are selling mobile phone cases. But then how do you kind of make it different? And whilst AI is helpful in the fact that, like I say, back in the day, that was our job to find a product. How can we improve it? AI obviously fast tracks that. And as you said about videos and marketing and the spend, but if everyone's doing it at the same way, then you're still not being unique, you know? So it's kind of like everyone's almost at that, if they're using it in the same way, they're getting the same results. So they're not getting themselves a competitive advantage.
So what would you say are some of the competitive advantages an e-commerce business should aim for? Like, where can it be better? And it doesn't always have to be the product, we know that. So what are the other dimensions?
The thing is, it's so specific to the marketplace. So, as I say, let's talk about TikTok Shop, which is unique, right? It's all about influencers, and it's about, you know, building your audience and having a product which totally gels with your audience, right? But that's a totally separate way of selling. Let's say you're selling on Amazon, right? Because on Amazon, there's still, like these days, there's a lot of paid advertising that people are willing to leverage the paid advertising to try and, like, because ultimately the where you are seen visibility wise on a page and the number of reviews you've got, let's say on an Amazon example, is pretty much dominates like the market, right? If you are number one, reasonable price, loads of reviews, who do you go for? Like that person. Do you scroll to page 8 and save $3 with someone that's got 3
Don't
reviews?
even go to the second.
So well, exactly, and that's and that's the kind of problem, isn't it? And this is where the sort I was saying about the skill kind of comes in, is that to launch new products is actually incredibly hard because you've got to, you know, feed the Amazon algorithm to kind of get to the top, and obviously that's throwing a lot of money at paid advertising. And you know what you were saying before about what kind of differentiates between the people that are successful and they're not. Again, if you haven't got deep enough pockets to kind of get past that, then you kind of run out at the first hurdle, that's again what I was saying. The barrier to entry is so much higher than it was several years ago. In, say, the Amazon space, the TikTok space, not quite so high. Like if you're good at, like, let's say, making viral videos that are geared towards a certain audience, and we've seen companies that are selling things, and I can't say what, where they've started relatively like within a year or two ago, and they're doing massive numbers on TikTok. And you're thinking, wow, like, you know, to get to those numbers in 18 months, 2 years is just unheard of, and it couldn't be done on Amazon in the same way. So that's where kind of markets are kind of going.
Now I'm curious to see if we can sell specific kind of shoes on TikTok and see.
You would like to show your gay shoes, would you? Are you going to keep that in your podcast?
Yeah, definitely.
So just for reference, if we're going to put this out there, is that when Seb came to Australia, I said, well, why haven't you got any like flip-flops? And he was like, oh, I haven't got any. Shall we get you some? He goes, yeah, but I don't like flip-flops. So I thought we'd get him some thongs, like some slips, but he didn't like those either. So we went to the cheapest shop and found these like really, like, you know, no offense to gay people, but gay sandals that like he wore. And the only thing that I'm surprised about is he didn't wear socks underneath them, but it was quite embarrassing. So carry on.
We could give it a go, you know, like we can.
I like the way you didn't wear them to this podcast.
I was, you know, not trying to distract the viewers.
Yeah, very good.
But I like that. We can, you know, start something. Now it's interesting because the things I hear from what you're saying is, and I try to bring it down to the most essential things, is first know your market, probably know your product, and know your numbers.
Know your numbers and innovate on the product. But you've got to know your numbers, right? This is basic 101 of any business. Know your numbers, like know your margins, you know.
Ideally, I would say, but you know enough business owners. I know enough business owners. We're both business owners ourselves, and I'm 100% sure you're much better than this. Also, coming from your background running the Amazon FBA business, and I know you from that time. I knew about the amounts of money you had to spend, like sometimes 5, even 6 figures, just to basically
buy the
push
stock,
through,
yeah.
buying stock, ad spend. So you really have to know your numbers immediately at best. But the reality is, for most business owners, that's not the case.
Correct.
They don't have a flying clue about their cash flow and liquidity and assets and everything and stuff that's moving around. And I don't know all the other terms in English right now. But I would make the argument now and this is how I'd like to link it to the accountant side of you. As we know that, like the business owner's job is to know the product, know the market. And then you could make the argument the accountant's job is to help the business owners know their numbers. Because at the end of the day, this is where it all comes together. Also using Link My Books, also other metrics are important. But isn't that the most obvious use case you could make for an accountant to say, listen, we're specialized in TikTok shops, we got the systems, we got the tools, we got the understanding and the experience. Come to us, we'll help you not just do your accounting, we'll also be able to help you grow your business and not making each and every mistake under the planet. We see that as an opportunity, but you mentioned earlier that you realized a lot of accountants are shying away from this specific niche, the e-commerce. And I'm wondering why. What's the reason in your opinion?
I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to just circle back to a little bit of something, because this thing about knowing your numbers is so important. And in fact, what we did with Link My Books was actually bring in the P&L into Link My Books so that you can actually see your numbers inside Link My Books. And what's also quite unique about us is that if you're selling on multiple sales channels, you can actually see an aggregated view across kind of sales channels. And on top of that, we also have industry benchmarking. So whilst we're very good at anonymizing data, you can see how your trends, like your fees ratio, etc., compare to other people in a similar niche to you. Because this is one of the problems that that people have when they're selling online, is that you're working in a silo.
Yeah.
Right. So is it, oh, my sales are down? Is it just me, or is it the big market? And accountants don't specifically know this unless they've got multiple accountants, multiple clients of the same thing. Whilst we have got multiple clients, and we allow people to see the benchmarks about where you are to see how the market kind of is moving. But to then circle back to kind of your question around like accountants, is often they shy away. Like if you're not, like any accountant could be an e-commerce accountant, right? But a lot of them we've seen are scared of it, right? They're used to, the classic brick and mortar businesses. It's relatively straightforward in their mind. They kind of understand it, but they're like, oh, e-commerce, oh no, scary. You're shipping outside of EU. What's it going to be? And so they're missing a massive opportunity, right? Because we have quite a lot of accountants on our system where they basically onboard their customers. They are the accountant, and they provide a package to their clients, right, which is accounting and bookkeeping, right? Basically, our software does 95% of the work for them, right? It's already imported all the data. It's already put it into their accounting software. The accounting software is already linked to the tax services. They click a button that kind of does it. So what is the role of the accountant? And I think a lot of the time it's this warm, fluffy feeling that you're doing something right. And so, they're taking quite big margins for their customers and paying us, a fee, but nothing near the amount of the fee that they're kind of charging. And so that they are making, and they can scale, because once you've, got one, like if you're doing a brick and mortar company, it takes you a certain amount of time to do all the bookkeeping for it. You're doing it all manually. But e-commerce, all the data's sucked in, it's pushed in there. They're phoning you up, oh, can you tell me blah, blah, blah? Yeah, I can do that, check in my accounting software. So it's actually a really easy industry to kind of account for with the right tools. So, and we've seen, accountants that have switched into this e-commerce mode and just take on so many clients because they've realized that it's you don't need 100 accountants to be able to manage, 200 businesses, 300 businesses. Like a handful can manage it.
Yeah, because by its nature, e-commerce is highly scalable, as all the data that comes in is already with the right technology in the right order, so to speak. Accountant has to do his or her thing with all whatever is necessary. Systemize it, and ideally, and this is what I keep hearing so often from the accountants and tax advisors I work with, is at the end of the day, they keep telling me, I want to work more with my client on a strategic level, more business consulting, based on numbers, based on facts and figures. So ironically, e-commerce is a potential pathway to break through and to get rid of all the very time intense, oftentimes manual labor that is necessary for
Absolutely.
bookkeeping, because we know that even though technology is advanced and everything, not all parts of the world and not all businesses are as equally advanced. So there's a lot of manual work required still, even though there's so many different solutions out there. But on the other hand, e-commerce is actually, it's already there where it should be to make it possible. But still, accountants are scared, and I'm wondering why. What do you think?
Well, I think there's two things, whether or not they're scared or uninformed, right? Because, when we've done like accounting shows
Okay.
and we've gone there, people come up to us and say, oh, we didn't know. I've got like an e-commerce. I've never known. I wish that I'd known your software exists. It's like, well, we're pretty well known. Like you just haven't looked for it. So I think that one of the problems that you've got, I'm not going to just say accountants, but any business owners, is they're so focused on trying to keep the business afloat. They're not looking at ways, like the real ways to solve the problem. Because the amount of people that we've had from these exhibitions that come on and we're like, wait, how did we live without you? And if you check our reviews on, the zero market rate, like literally people are going, I can't believe I tried to do this. So accountants, yes, they're scared, right? But they're scared because they're not educated, right? And so if they were, and this information, it's, whilst we deal with sort of the UK market, I know a company Pathway that deals with Germany, like there are software out there that can probably do most of what you kind of need. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, this is too stressful, it's like, well, look around, find a mastermind, mix with the right people. You're soon going to find that like someone's going to offer you a solution. And I'll give you an example from that we've been here. We've bounced lots of ideas off each other's, and there's been multiple times where you've said, this, I'm like, wow, that's actually really interesting. Like I can take that into my business, and I'm sure vice versa. Like we're sharing information. So if you're operating in a silo as an accountant, then that's all you're going to hear is your own thoughts. If you expand your kind of network, it maximizes. And on that point, I think it's important to say that this is a little bit where, as me and Dan, individually very successful sellers, right? And we were competitors, but when we started sharing some of our strategies, we got better. The fact that we're working together, we're multipliers of each other. The fact that we're with Visma, we're a bigger multiplier of that, right? And so I think the answer to it, the fear and the confusion, is to start building your network and mixing with the right people. Invest some time in yourself, like in your business, whether or not that's with a coach or a program that's going to kind of help you, that's going to basically show you these ideas that you're missing. And I can almost guarantee it will pay for itself 100 times over.
Oh yeah. Well, I can back that up and confirm that. And if you are an Austrian-based tax advisor or accountant, reach out to me. We got a thing called the Future Tax Collective, where we do just what Pete mentioned. We've been doing it for 4 years now, over 30 members, and I can just confirm this is how it started.
Yeah.
This is how it started 5 years ago in its original way, where the most progressive accountants that I've met in Austria were like, there's so many things we could do technology-wise, strategy, this, but don't have the time, resources, energy to look for it for myself. But I know other people would have. So why not expand our
100%.
perspective, share best practices, learn from each other. 100%. There's enough work for everyone. We don't need more work. We need to work smarter.
Absolutely. And I, what you said is exactly right. Like if you work with people that can help you fast track, your business your life gets easier, right? Your business becomes more successful and you get more free time. So what's stopping people doing that? And as I said, I think that the thing is, it's that people get so caught in doing the same thing that they've been doing all of the time, they don't take a moment to take a breath. So if I was to give one tip to your audience, it is find a mastermind group. If you're in Austria, pick up with Sebastian. If it's not, find people in your local market that are doing it. Because you only need kind of one tip that might be the one that takes your business to the next level. And in fact, that's how we met, which was accountability. And by just bouncing ideas off each other, like we both progressed, even we were in sort of different markets. Ironically, we're now back in the same market.
Now we are.
But it was that by having the different inputs and the different perspectives makes you so much more powerful than you are on your own.
100%. And you're still gonna make mistakes, but you don't have to make every mistake. Or the worst mistake is not even looking for better solutions.
Well, I think the worst mistake is not making enough mistakes.
Yeah,
right?
also.
Because the thing is, if you're playing it safe, it does obviously accounting debt has to be accurate. I'm not saying make up numbers, right? But try new ideas and fail fast, right? Because if you're not failing, then you're not trying enough things. It's like even inside our product, we try new things to see if it's going to benefit the customer. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. And it's like, but at least we're trying. We get the mark, but we move kind of quickly. Like, but if you're just going to play it safe, right? And when I say I need to be very careful about, I'm saying about playing safe by ideas and implementation of trying new tactics as strategies, as opposed to any form of financial shortcuts.
Exactly.
Right. But if you're doing that, right, you're going to find, yes, maybe if you're unlucky, 1 out of 10 is a winner, right? If you're more lucky, probably 8 out of 10 are the winner. Like that more than offsets any of the failures that you've kind of got. So, do more, fail fast.
Yeah.
So that's my feedback on that.
It's interesting. And I start to see the shift in Austria, and I'm interested to hear what's going on in the rest of the world. Of course, love the accountants and tax advisors I work with, or in my sphere. They are more and more adapt to what you just said, which I would call the agile entrepreneurial mindset.
Yep.
And as you said, they are more willing to take a leap of faith in their business strategies and actions, not in the actual work they deliver for their clients. So just to make that clear. Which is of course hard if you realize where they come from. Then their nature is to be very detail oriented and very much like this. So it's hard for many of them to basically put another hat on and become more let's say risk takers. But it's getting definitely more, and the way I see it with what you shared is there's a huge opportunity now and in the next couple of years to really basically claim your big stake in the market for becoming the go-to person for whatever, TikTok shops, Temu, I don't know what's going on in Austria on e-commerce behalf, but that's
well, it's going to come to you. It may not be the first market, but
exactly.
Everything filters down to every other market. It just happens to be which ones it's going to go to. So I would get ahead of the game. But I think it's interesting that you said that, because I think that yes, it might be hard, right? But I think it's going to be a lot harder if you've got a whole load of new, more driven companies coming back who are embracing new technology, right? And then they're starting to take over your business, and suddenly one client after another starts to drop off, and you're struggling just to make ends meet. I think that's a lot harder than being innovative now, because I think the biggest mistakes, and the same thing we say with the smaller sellers, it's like, you know what, like while your business is going okay, that's the time to start thinking about going to the next level. Like, unfortunately, you can't coast. Right, there's either up or down. There's never. You might think that you're going. You might be going. I don't want to take. At some point, right, then some of your clients may stop trading. Like there might be retirement. It might be on board. It might be death. It might be, we don't know. But you start losing some of your clients if you've not got that pipeline to start bringing on more clients. That is effectively a death cycle. And do you want to be that person? I reckon that would be pretty stressful, not being able to pay the mortgage on your house because your business has suddenly failed after 10 years of success. Why have you had 10 years of success and now you're not? Probably because you took your eyes off the ball and you got too complacent. And I think that is a risk for any business owner.
That is. So would you say the same, let's call it complacency or not risk taking, is also true for other countries as well, Australia, UK?
I think it's everywhere. I don't, again, I can't speak for the Austrian market. I think that complacency is like a natural human tendency, unfortunately. So I think that you couldn't really say that one country is worse than the other. Obviously you got the US hoorah spirit, like that, likes to kind of push through. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I prefer a slightly slow and steady kind of like business kind of growth strategy.
Yeah.
But I also like what you said around like ring fencing your market. Like, you know, one of the things that I did in e-commerce and we didn't link my books was obviously the US, big market. Oh, and so many people were like, right, I'm going to enter the US because it's a big market. We kind of didn't. We took the opposite, Matt. You know, I was a big seller in the UK and Europe. I was not a big seller in the US. And in the same ways that we sort of planted our flag in the UK market with Link My Books, and whilst we've expanded to other markets, it is still our home market, and that has been our special sauce, right? And I would encourage, particularly in smaller markets like Austria, to do the same, because there is a real benefit to having like a niche market, which is like the intricacies of knowing not just the tax regulations, but also the people.
Yeah.
You know, and an easy example I will give you for this is the difference between a German seller and a German client and a UK client is that if I sold a product on Amazon, getting reviews for my product was relatively easy, because for a UK seller, did you like the product? Yes, I thought it was great. Right? Now, German buyers seem to only do it, they wouldn't like to leave a positive review, but as soon as anything was wrong, they would basically complain about it. Right? And whilst that is in itself a problem, but it's also a unique thing, is because each country has a different mindset.
Yeah.
And if you can work out what like your country mindset, like how it works, and we know a UK seller, we know how, you know, UK people work. It's very different from the US, right? Maybe slightly nearer to Australia, but even Australia is slightly different. But that is a real advantage if you know your home market and niche down, nail that, and then expand outwards. And that can be country, it can be product, it can be sector, you know, whatever it's going to be. But if you take that and then build out for it, you've got pretty strong foundations.
Exactly, and also you mentioned something at the middle stage where the e-commerce focused accounts, they basically take your software, Link My Books, and all their heavy lifting is done for them. And I'm quite confident that we see that also from other companies Visma has bought, but also other solutions that are around. More and more from the, I think you could call it bread and butter work for the accountants and tax advisors is going to be taken away or become more and more of a commodity. So it's going to be increasingly difficult to charge high margin fees for an accountant for a classic bookkeeping services, because there will be the point where business owners realize, interesting. Well, if he can set up the system for me, I can set up the system for me as well. So why do I have to pay him the margin? So I'm also expecting to see some kind of shifts in terms of who produces what and the ownership of data.
Look, I'm not sure I totally agree with you on this, because I think that, yes, you're totally right that like as a client of an accountant, there's so much software out there that you can do it like they can do it themselves. But there's still this, I don't know, it's not an illusion, but it's effectively they believe that the tax in the accountant is a necessary step that they kind of need, and they like the assurance that that's what like the accountant is doing. Now, as an accountant, if basically you are literally just taking the accounts, pushing it in, like taking the software like ours and then sending it to the zero accounting software and filing their VAT returns, I totally agree that people are going to be like, well, what are you doing for your money? But the clever accountants are saying, right, okay, you know, you've now got all of this extra time, like all of this thing that a traditional accountant and bookkeeper would be doing, like has been taken away from them. So you can get complacent and you go, right, oh, this is great. But if you're then adding value, as you said, which is basically, well, I've looked at your numbers, right? That we're seeing that your fees seem to be creeping up. Like, what's happened with that? Like, your price of your goods are going up. What can you do about it? Like, because again, it's like what we were saying around the echo chamber, and you're better to have somebody to work with you. The clever accountants are the ones that talk to their clients and then they say, look, let's discuss it, because it may not even be that they are providing any new insight into the market, but by just having the discussion around the numbers, because I don't know about you, is that you know, like I am often, if somebody tells me to talk about a particular subject, you've got my undivided attention at that time for that. But I'm also busy in doing something else. Now, imagine that you're a client, your numbers are all taken care of, right? You don't really think about it. If the accountant says, hey, let's talk about your numbers once a month, right? Let's talk about it. Where do you think you're going? What do you think this is going to be? Even if it's just asking questions, what does the client feel? They feel heard, right? They feel that they've got somebody that they can speak to, and it gives them confidence to grow, right? So the accountant, whilst doing their job, is also becoming the strategic advisor for their client. And why would you not pay for that?
Oh, 100%. Totally.
You know,
totally agree with that. Like, I think that's the next evolution for accountants, and I think it's important to distinguish the bookkeeping service from the accountant service. So I was referring to that just the bookkeeping service is more taken away from solutions like yours. But then now the accountant has actually the opportunity to become more of a strategic advisor, like that one, or as I call it sometimes a CFO as a service.
Yep.
Who basically sits down with you, talks with you about the numbers, and we know most of business owners don't really like talking about numbers, but if it's put into something tangible for them, let's say how they become more profitable or how they whatever, backed with their own numbers and also benchmarked numbers, awesome. This is where we all basically want to see everything moving.
But you've knocked the nail on the head though, is it's not around just showing someone their numbers. That's boring as boring, right? But I didn't need it. But basically, if you're looking at the numbers and going, right, okay, well, your fees are this. Like, where are, like, you know, if you reduce your fees a bit, like, your profit's going to go up. Like, who doesn't want their profit to kind of go up?
Yeah.
You know, like that's really interesting. So you can take a boring subject and turn it into a really focused subject, because at the end of the day, you've started a business, right, to make some money, right? Yeah, I know we have the odd lifestyle business, but they still want to make money. No one's going to say no to making more money. And you know, you kind of said what was the value on the business. That it's interesting for our software, right? I can guarantee you that we will, whatever our cost is, right, you will save that 10 times over by the amount of free time that you're even attempting to do it right. And it's the same with the tax advisor or the clever ones, right, is that you become the strategic partner, right? You should be able to work with your clients to make them more money, right? So you're making money for your client, they're making, why is that not a win-win?
Oh yeah.
Right? And why would anyone ever lose? Right? Why would anyone leave you, right? If basically you're sitting there, this guy is making me help more money, am I going to go, oh, I'm going to go to this other accountant because they're going to, oh no, this one's making me new money, right? So it's like, it's a non-brainer, but I think that the issue that you would just say is a traditional accountants is they have been down this route of, it was complicated, give me all of your paper receipts and I will do this thing and file it for you. As you say, that world's changing, right? Certainly in e-commerce. So you either keep up with it or see you later.
Exactly.
Give you 5 years.
And it's not just theory what we're talking about here, because I know of a company started in Australia and now got headquarters in the US, in the UK, who's doing just like this. They even call themselves the e-commerce growth accountants. So it is already happening. It's not like a theoretical construct.
No.
So basically learn from what's already out there, make advantage of technology that is already there. When has Link My Book started? When did you guys start?
2017 we started.
So it's not like you didn't show up just yesterday.
No.
So it's already been almost a decade that your solution is here.
Your maths isn't very good, but you know, that's really counts.
Well, but still not just like yesterday. So what I'm saying is now is the best time. Now is always the best time because it's the only one we have. But leverage technology and unleash the power of digital to raise human performance. That is what I'm seeing is the opportunity that we have all at hands, and I see that shift is only progressing faster and faster and faster.
I think I agree. I think I'll add one thing to that though, is, you know, and I think I told you of the analogy of how many red cars did you see? And to explain this for your audience is I was with some young guys and I was driving around, and we were talking. The classic thing is, I don't know where to start a business. I know this may not be relevant for your audience, but it is around opportunities. And I said, well, how many red cars have you seen? And they said, I don't know, I haven't been looking. And I said, well, look now. And he's like, red car, red car, red car, red car. And now what's the point of this? The point of this is there's opportunities, whether or not to start a business or to grow your business everywhere, right? It really is. I could start another business tomorrow because I've got so many ideas, it's ridiculous, right? But if you're not looking for them, and the important thing that you were saying around some of your, the people that you were saying in the US, is you don't have to come up with a new idea. Right, you literally could take the idea that and the US is a great place to see, people that are coming up with great business ideas and saying, would that apply with a slight twist to my home market? Often it would be, how many, and again, I don't know what the opportunity is in Austria, but how many Austrian bookkeepers are there for e-commerce sellers? Now you might say, well, there's not that many e-commerce sellers. I bet you there's probably more than you think there are.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for opportunities in every bit, and whether or not that's growth or starting a new business, they are everywhere if you start looking with them. And if you work with the people that open your eyes, and the processes that you mentioned just make building these businesses so much easier than it ever was before.
Oh yeah, and using the tools that are already available.
The tools that are already available.
So to wrap this episode up, one last question for you, Pete. If you were a business owner and you already, of course, use Link My Books and Xero and all the other things, what's one additional piece of software you would recommend any other e-commerce business owner?
I think the basic one is just use AI, ChatGPT, or the AI of your choice, right? It empowers you in so many different ways when you start using it. If you're not using AI 50% at a minimum of your time, you're falling behind. So yeah, that would be kind of my tip. And I think that is something I'm seeing. I think both of us have found super interesting. The lack of AI use in businesses is baffling to me.
Agreed. And it doesn't even matter which one you use, just use it, learn, evolve, make mistakes.
100%.
And see what it goes. Because what worked tomorrow may not work next week. It's just progressing at a pace that we can't keep up.
Absolutely.
So 100% agree. And we need to learn the mindset, the skill of interacting with it, not so much each and every feature, because that's coming. We never know what's going on. Pete, awesome talking to you here in Australia, in Sydney actually. And if you want to learn more about Link My Books and how it can help you for your business, definitely check out linkmybooks.com. Link is in the description as always. And again, if you're an Austrian tax advisor or accountant, reach out to me to learn more about the Future Tax Collective, where like-minded business owners and accountants like you will share knowledge, get best practices to get ahead of the crowd. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Seb.
Yeah.